at least the messaging that we give out is that, recovery is not shameful and that it's fun to be in recovery.
Welcome back to Currently, the conversation. Today we have two very special guests, Corey and Marney Winfield, co-founders of 217 Recovery, a nonprofit in Traverse City that's helping Northern Michigan rewrite the narrative around addiction, recovery, and hope. Corey and Marney, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Oh my gosh, it's so great to have you. And full disclosure, I have to let everyone know, I get the privilege of working with you guys from time to time in my day job. I'm working in reentry. So I've known you guys for a bit, and I'm just so excited to talk about your stories.
I know, and I was actually a little hurt. Is this the 8th episode? It took 8. We're supposed to be good friends.
It's
like, what?
Lucky number 8, Corey. Lucky number 8,
Wait
right?
for my phone to ring, and it finally did. No, and I'm glad we're here, though.
Yeah, super excited to have you both here. And I guess at this point, we talk about the origin, right? Mm-hmm. Every good story has that beginning. It has that, that piece, that kind of the spark that lit the fire. And that is definitely the situation with you two. And Corey, when I look into your bio, it says that you had a serious wake-up call back in 2015. There was something that happened with your health, and you decided to make the decision to find sobriety in 2018. That was the spark, really, that started 217. Can you kind of walk us through that moment?
Yeah, and those moments were so different, but so huge. Mm-hmm. And the first was the whole liver failure thing and kidney failure, when that happens and you're in the hospital and you're like, okay, yeah, this is a problem now. And now everybody knows it, at least family members and stuff. And in work, I tried to tell them that it was, I took the wrong pill from the doctor and it shut everything down. But that was the first, okay, Corey, you can't really hide from this anymore. And that started the whole shame journey of, I didn't think I was a bad person, but man, now I'm an alcoholic, oh man, I was messing around in the wrong yard and caught some cancer, right. Shouldn't have been over there. And that's kind of how I kind of addressed it and went with it. But then years later, as I try to put it all together and my life just keeps falling apart and I start losing everything. And then it's like, okay, let's go to treatment. But I'd only want to go for a week or two and would get kind of kicked out or would leave actually. Sure. And it was hard for me to get the mental part of it until I actually went to a mental health facility. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that, they think, I need to go to treatment. Let's go to addiction treatment. You need to go to, some kind of addiction treatment. It's the mental health part, that was really keeping me stuck. So
yeah, and that's, a wonderful segue into talking really about you, Marney, your clinical credentials and your personal experience. Sort of intertwined together. So I'm not good at letters after names. I don't have any. I just know that you do. You have an LLMSW and a CADC, and you're taking a test for another group of letters. Can you tell us a little bit about what your credentials are and a little bit about your story?
Sure. So, I had somewhat similar in terms of the fact that my health was not well either. I had peaks and valleys of productivity and downs in my active addiction and efforts in recovery. And so, I struggled with addiction for decades until my body had taken a toll. I didn't remember what it felt like to feel good anymore. And I knew that if I needed to make a decision, it needed to be from me. It needed to be something that I wanted to do. Right. And it had to be my decision because that was the only way it was going to work. I couldn't go for my boss. I couldn't go to treatment for my family. Couldn't go for an ex-boyfriend or for a pet. It had to be for me. And so I finally made that decision. And, my addiction started I want to say born. I don't know if that's the right word, but really kind of arised and was apparent when I was a sophomore in college because I went to Michigan State and I still graduated with honors, but that's kind of where I recognized I started having these alcoholic behaviors. And I recognized, there was times where I was like, I'm shaking, but if I drank some, then the shakes would go away. But I thought I was like, I'm in college, I'm just in this partying stage, I'll grow out of this, it's no big deal. And I didn't. But I managed it at times at different levels. But after I graduated with my bachelor's, I was pretty much done with schooling at that time. And it wasn't until, I got sober and I realized, I followed the advice of my own therapist, and I worked through a lot of the painful things that I had going on in my own life from my history, like my own trauma. And until I really addressed that and recognized the benefit of talk therapy, that could I really get healthy.
Wow.
And so that was my true inspiration for when I got sober. I was like, you know what? It wasn't so much pay it forward, but it was just like honoring the fact that I'm still here today because of the fact that I took advantage of not only, God or whatever reason it was that I was still around, but also that there were people that cared about me, and cared about my well-being that weren't my family, and just wanted me to get better. So for that reason, I finished graduate school, and so I'm a limited license master social worker. So I'm a clinical therapist, and then I'll be working on it's dropping a letter. So instead of limited license, I'll be a licensed master social worker once I take the proper examination and do well on it, hopefully, cross my fingers. And then the CAADC is actually fairly new. I just took another examination to certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor. So
wow.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about, sort of realizing that this might have been an issue in college, but thinking, well, I'm in college. It's a part of the culture, right? Like that's what college kids are supposed to do. And Corey, even though you didn't mention this, I do know this about you, that you have a background in entertainment and media, and that's a part of the culture of just, like having a few drinks and, unwinding and partying and things like that. And it's so socially acceptable in those two arenas that it can become incredibly problematic before people even really realize it.
Yeah. For being in radio and being on a rock station, that was my job, to go drink, and I was supposed to be at the bar. Like people, like seriously, my boss has said, like, you're supposed to be out there. I want people to see you out there at the bars on the weekend. You have to be in with the people. And okay, sure, sounds good. And then people buy you drinks when you're at the bar. So, hey, this is kind of a good thing to do, and it's not, it's not really healthy for someone to do.
Yeah. But the expectation that you were going to hang out with your listeners and drink. Yeah, I get that. And in the college world too, I mean, that is the expectation. Even parents are sort of co-signing on that, right?
Absolutely. I would say more, the rule rather than the exception was that if you're in college, then you're gonna party, depending on some more than others. But it is. I mean, it's kind of part of the culture, like you said.
So, you each understood that it was time for you to take that step in your own personal journey, but you moved that personal journey into shaping 217 recovery. So how was that decision made? Can you kind of give us how did you go from I'm a person who is navigating sobriety to I'm going to start an organization where we help other people do that?
Well, it was when I was in treatment, and I was in treatment, and when I went in, I was going to work on three things. I wanted to be more spiritual, I wanted to find my purpose, and I want to help other people. Ironically, that's what 217 means. That's the angel number. Like, I didn't even know that going in, but those were the things that I was working on, and it really freaked me out when I found that out later. But when I went in there, I was like, let's figure this out. And early on, it was mentioned to me, like, hey, you should start a podcast. What am I going to talk about? And I could talk about your recovery. And I was like, no, we can't talk about that. We got to keep that secret. We can't let anybody know. But when I did, it was so freeing. And it was just like kicking the doors off of something, just like, boom, I'm here. And I wasn't saying, hi, I'm Corey. I'm a horrible person. I'm an alcoholic. I'm Corey. I'm in recovery, so it gave me power. And it was really inspiring. So to think about it while I was in treatment, it's like, hey, let's turn this into a company and let's do this. And of course, you have other people in treatment with you, and they're like, that's a great idea. Yeah. Let's do it. Yeah. And I had like half the place was going to do this, and I'll do billing, and I'll do this, and I'll push people down the hall or whatever, like somebody was going to do something. And then I got out, we went to the sober living house, and then a week later I picked this other guy up, bring him back, and he was disappointed when he got in the car, and he's all cheesing, smiling at me, and he's like, play it. And I was like, play what? And he's like, the podcast. Oh, I haven't started it yet. And he's like, I'm so disappointed in you. And then I was like, all right, well, we're going to do it Saturday. And so we started the podcast. And from there, we started asking questions. We started meeting with people. And I started like interviewing different people in different organizations. And it's like, well, how come this isn't happening? How come this isn't happening? And so it naturally became into, well, how come nobody's doing that? And then I'm meeting with the people who fund people. And I'm like, how come nobody's doing this? And we'd love to do that. And then kind of have to prove yourself for a couple of years. And then kind of went from that. And then just finding the right people like Marney, when I tried to break up with her. And,
True story.
And I was like, hey, I'm not good enough for you, but I'm still going to need you around to help me with this. And so I remember emailing her stuff because, like, you have to find those right people. And like I said, when I started in the whole thing and then moved it to the sober living home, and those people started falling off. I mean, that just happens. You know, this was my dream. This was my thing. And I can't expect them to, you know, they'll jump on for a little while.
Yeah.
But
was 217 the number, like your door number in your sober living house?
no, it was in the treatment center.
In the treatment center.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's also angel numbers?
Yeah. Well, I didn't even know that until the lady emailed me because I was on the podcast and I was talking about those things that I was working on. And then someone emailed us and she was like, do you know what the angel number to 217 is? And I was like, no, why would I know that? And I looked it up and I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
That was pretty freaky.
That is unbelievable. So you're trying to break up with Marney, but you still need her around. And obviously you didn't break up.
No. Well, we did for a minute and then I won her back.
And 217 is, I mean, it's you guys and you have a group of other people who are around who are actually offering the services that you're talking about, Corey, that when you started to like get out there with your lived experience and say, well, how come nobody's doing this? And then you became that person who's doing this along with your team. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means? What are you doing? Marney, what is it that you guys are doing at 217?
So, well, 217, at first, some of the services that we were focusing on, which, like Corey said, he was identifying there was this gap in services, was transportation to treatment. And so for a few years, he started off literally just doing it with his own car that was approved as a non-medical transportation. And then we didn't even have an office. And he was the only, it was him, and then I was just kind of along the ride, you know, just kind of like, you know, there to help out when I could.
So you were transporting people, really?
Corey was, yeah.
Yeah.
And then when we kind of things moved along and we actually got some grant funding to do that, and then we're looked at the other services that we could provide, and having a place, because one of our things is fun and recovery. And I know we'll talk about a little bit about, Corey will talk about, he loves talking about fun and recovery. Yeah. And then we kind of, since he was a certified peer recovery coach, recovery coaching services was something that we wanted to offer. And we wanted to make sure that everything that 217 Recovery had to offer was completely free of charge.
Right.
So no charge for anything that we provide. And so that whether that means we're creating events for people at the treatment centers, or just the recovery community in general, the recovery coaching, we are doing recovery friendly workplace, which is it's actually training and giving businesses, local businesses or agencies in the local area, just information about substance use disorder, what it is, how to work with individuals who might be either struggling with active addiction or earlier in recovery, and how can you help support employees and provide a recovery-friendly workplace culture that will let people succeed and be healthy, and instead of that kind of shame-based, stigma-filled, place that substance use disorder has lived for so long.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the rides where it started, and I know we have talked about this too, but if someone is on their way to treatment, I'm assuming that can be a pretty long ride. And if you have someone who is driving you, who is transporting you, who knows where you've been, that can make that long ride a little bit easier, I would say.
I would think. I only took it once,
Yeah.
and it wasn't from me. It was from a guy like early on, and they had took me from my apartment to the ER, and I had to make him stop. I was like, I'm going to throw up.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the conversations I have with people, they're real, they're meaningful. I don't have anything to sell them.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, buddy, good luck.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what I think that's what the real key to it is there's nothing for us to sell them. Like,
Right.
we're not, there's nothing for us to gain for lying to them or manipulating them for any way or for anything.
Lived experience has come such a long way, especially in the field of mental health, where we are talking about our experiences having, obviously it's important to get education and training and things like that, but your experiences are education and training.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really interesting that, when you start to focus on peer-to-peer recovery coaching, when you focus on peer-to-peer peers driving peers into meetings or to treatment, it does change things. Maybe even from that shame mindset of like, the person who's driving me, I know is not judging me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's an element of effectiveness that doesn't live anywhere else other than if it's coming from somebody who has experienced that same thing or something similar.
Yeah.
It's a respect almost, and almost kind of like, not only are you meeting the person where they're at, is that you can say with confidence and also with empathy, like, I understand what you're going through, and you're not just saying it to make them, feel better.
Right.
Because they're so used to that. People be like, oh, I understand. And you're like, no, you don't.
You don't.
But you don't. And then when you have somebody who can say that, who really does understand, that's something that you can't replace.
Yeah. And I've noted that in my personal, work with reentry, when you have someone who has experienced it, there's a shift that the individual says, okay, you do get it, Over the years, since you've been doing this, what sort of impact have you seen in Northern Michigan, not just from the services that you are providing, but just in the recovery community in general? And, I grew up here in Traverse City my whole life, and I'm not joking when I say that people say, you come here on vacation, you leave on probation. There is an abundance of bars and restaurants and wineries and breweries, and everything really does seem to be centered around alcohol, and now in some cases around maybe dispensaries, and it is kind of a party town, and I see at the same time we've seen an increase in people who are finding their own recovery journeys. Can you talk a little bit about that in the Northern Michigan landscape? What you've seen over the years?
I'll let Marnie start on that one.
Yeah. So I would say that's very much true. I think we recognize that this is very much a tourist town, and with that comes the celebration factor. So people that are not worried about work and, school and so on, it's, that they have this time off and they can do, the no rules, they can do whatever. We're here to drink and to lounge and to, experience and whatever. Yeah. And so, and that's, and that's fine. And you'd expect that anywhere, just like people that go to Vegas or whatever, like there's kind of this thing about why the people go there. But at the same time, this is a community that people live in. And so it has been recognized. And I think that there has been a lot of different agencies and organizations that have recognized that, along with the need, the overall across the board, need for treatment and substance use disorder, and recognition of like, when you have problems, you need to address that, is that there has been this, I think, shift in that, at least the messaging that we give out is that, recovery is not shameful, and that it's fun to be in recovery. Like, it doesn't have to be boring. Yeah. I think that's what everybody's scared of. And then encouraging people to be around that messaging and be around other people that have, are similar and where they're at with either early recovery or, long-term recovery. It doesn't need to be in coaching or in mentoring or sponsors. It's just this element of being around healthy people doing healthy things, and that still can be fun. So, there's little tiny, whether it's 12-step programs or it's really adopted. I think Traverse City's also really adopted multiple pathways, and so, which is unique. And so things like Dharma and Wellbriety, things like that, I think are kind of are more prevalent than they used to be.
Because I do know that it used to feel like, you had one pathway, and like, so if the big book and Bill W.'s message didn't resonate with you, then, I guess you're doing it wrong. But that's not accurate.
Right.
How about you? Do you have anything to add about how you feel maybe about the landscape here?
Exciting about future changes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll leave it like
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
You know?
It's tough.
Yeah, because you can look at what's happening right now, because there's some hard times and some bad things happened or happening. But if you can get past that to go look at the opportunities that could be coming because of that, you know, then you can go, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Just because something went away doesn't mean that something better is not going to replace it.
Right. Very true.
We want to be a part of that. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think it's important to note too, you know, the stigma surrounding substance use disorder too. And, you know, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm very well maybe. But I do feel like when we started to really pay attention to the opioid epidemic, we really started to understand that this quote unquote face of substance use disorder can be any of us. Mm-hmm. That it's, you know, it's not this stigmatized, you know, person that you think it's going to be, or it could be anyone. It can happen to anyone. It can be anyone. And did you find that when we started to really look at the stigma, maybe not just in this area, but as a culture altogether, and say, wow, this is real. It's not anyone's fault most of the time, right? And all of the time, it's something that I think that kind of changed things a little bit, where you removed some of the stigma in recovery too. Mm-hmm. Would that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think
took away the shame.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think you're spot on when you say, I mean, you know, we've known this for a long time, is that substance use disorder doesn't discriminate. So it doesn't matter what occupation you have, or, you know, if you're male or female, or what race or ethnicity, all those things, you know, you're just as, you know, prone to becoming, you know, just coming to addiction as anyone else. And I mean, there are elements that have been identified in terms of like risk factors and protective factors and things of that nature that, you know, will make you more prone or not, or less. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's the stigma either way is, you know, like there's doctors and there's lawyers and there's dentists and there's orthopedic surgeons. And I mean, and the thing is the more, I mean, I'm very out loud about my recovery. Right. And so I'll be in my dentist's office and talking about it, and they will tell you right off the bat, because they're like, you're so comfortable talking about it. More often than not, they'll be like, oh, that's so amazing. You know, I have a niece that is in recovery, or yeah, I think my husband might have, you know, and, you know, it's here nor there, is finding that comfort factor of being able to say, like, it's okay to talk about it, and they're not bad people. Right. Your niece was not a bad person, or your husband, not a bad person. No. You know, it's something that's, you know, it's an addiction.
And I think too, I grew up, you know, I was in high school in the 90s, and I mean, I remember seeing a lot of sitcoms where, I mean, everybody was just getting drunk all the time. You know, that's just kind of part of what was cool. I also remember hearing the term functional alcoholic a lot, like it was a badge of honor, but that doesn't exist. And so I think maybe society also puts on these sort of bumpers that if you're going to work, you're making money, you're making your house payments, you're going to your kids' soccer games, you don't have a problem. But you still may have a problem if you are dependent on a substance, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. In society, kind of to go back to the other question that you'd asked too, and the way society kind of treats us in the stigma, when you think about somebody who, if I just were to say heroin addict, right, or, you know, a junkie or whatever, you think of like maybe an unhoused person, or maybe somebody who's just kind of unshowered or unclean and hair's messy. When they first started doing drugs, they didn't look like that. Mm-hmm. They had money, you know, like, and it's the whole money thing. And the Smash Mouth, the lead singer from Smash Mouth, died. And he was on YouTube, one of his songs for our kid. And I had said something to Marnie. I'm like, yeah, that guy died like a year ago, alcohol-related stuff. And he wasn't that old. And Marnie's like, oh, my gosh. And I looked at her and I was like, man, if I would have had money, I would be dead. Like, forget about it. So, like, a lot of people think, oh, they have money. And no, and that might make it harder, you know. And what we do, it doesn't matter. It's free. You know, whether you come in with $1 million or you come in with a dime, we're going to help you the same. And that's the beauty of it. And that's how it needs to be for people to kind of really move forward and get that help.
I love that it's free, by the way. I mean, because it just removes all the barriers.
Yeah, and we're funded
completely.
through grants,
Yeah.
but like to charge the person for the help, that's not right.
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the fun in recovery? And I know this is your favorite thing, Corey, and that is one of the things I think that stands out about your organization is that you do talk about recovery as being more than just getting sober. It's building your life, right? It's a life that you have fun. And on your website, you say the mission is to promote a productive and fun recovery lifestyle that inspires hope. So what does fun in recovery look like for you, Corey? Like, when you're building this out for people, what does it look like?
Oh, man. It changes every hour.
Yeah.
No, it's just like, what can we do today that's fun? Or, how can we do something outside the box that somebody wouldn't expect? And how can we entertain? Like, we went and we took people to the hospital. I guess I don't want to say abandoned, but it is abandoned. The old mental hospitals that they had.
Yeah.
And like most people wouldn't think like, hey, who wants to tour that? Well, we did, and we paid for a group of like 20 people to go through there, through
And it was
grants
fun.
that we have. Yeah. And it was somebody that, was living here and then sober living. They wouldn't think, hey, I'm going to go do this. But then they did, and they enjoyed it, and they thought, wow, I had fun doing something sober.
Yeah.
So that's just a little glimpse into it. But we went to Tigers games, Lions before they were like really good.
Yeah.
They gave us tickets, and we took people there, and they were really good seats. So thanks to Lions for that. Thanks. And thanks to the Detroit Tigers, and even the Cubs tried to give us some stuff, but then COVID came. But yeah, it's fun stuff like that.
Is it also rebuilding community? Because I do know that people who are moving into recovery, one of the very first things you might have to do is to look at who you're surrounding yourself with. Because it's pretty hard to stay sober with the people you used to get drunk with, right? Is that a big piece of this? Is like you can have sober friends. Look at us,
Absolutely. At least for me, I know when they say, you need to change everything. I really did need to change everything. And that included my air quotes friend group. Because when I was in active addiction, I don't know if any of them truly were my friends. They were just people that happened to be, using the same drug of choice as I did. And, they had no problem not getting a hold of me once I got sober. I got a new phone number. I got a new email address. I moved locations, to stay, completely up here in Traverse City. And sometimes that's what it takes. And that's a scary ask for people, especially when you sit down and you're, having a conversation with individuals like, all right, what's your plan after this? How do you plan on staying sober? And, one thing we talk about is your support network. What does that look like? And if they're like, oh, I have my buddies, it's like, are those healthy relationships? You have to ask yourself those hard questions. Are these toxic relationships that could take you down and could be a risk to your sobriety? Right. And, how they're going to handle that. And so like what we do in terms of having these events, even though they're kind of few and far between, it gives people an opportunity to say, here's this group of people and they're all having fun and they're all laughing and they're all telling jokes and they're dancing. And, this is an opportunity, like this really does exist. Right. And so it gives people that idea and knowledge, knowing like that, you can have fun in recovery and it is possible to make new connections. And the piece that is most important is that there's the similarity between all of us is that, we've chosen this lifestyle now, which is healthier and better for us.
Yeah.
So,
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your recovery-friendly workplace, because I will say Networks Northwest, which is the organization that I work for during the day, they are now in that club as a recovery-friendly workplace. And I think that is doing so much to reduce stigma and to educate and to allow for people to understand how they can support employees and colleagues and coworkers who are going through recovery. I think it's so beneficial, and I think every single business should do it. So how can people get involved in that? Is that, can you talk a little bit about why you think that's critical and why employers and businesses should consider this?
Sure. So, kind of bringing this full circle, as we had talked about what we think of when we think of somebody who is in addiction. You think of homeless and dirty and, jobless and, living on the streets, whatever. Nobody ever thinks gainfully employed.
Yeah.
Which 70% of the workforce does actually have either a substance use disorder or know somebody who does.
Yeah.
And so it's not something that's just, it's more prevalent than we think. And so the recovery-friendly workplace is an opportunity, and it's a completely free training as well. And it's an opportunity for, us as trainers to sit down with the leadership committees or whatever staff that's interested to be able to pass along that information about, basically wherever you're at with your knowledge with substance use disorder, like here are some of the basics. And then also too is even things as simple as like person first language.
Yeah.
Like instead of calling somebody a drunk or an alcoholic, it's somebody who struggles with substance use disorder.
Right.
Because you're a person first.
Person first.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that can make a world of difference. And carrying that kind of empathy and care into your workplace can make a huge difference, because feeling like a supported employee regardless, and it might not even be you that's struggling. It might be a family member.
Right.
And that you have that confidence to come in and say, listen, this is what's going on with me at home, and, I could use your support.
Wow.
And so when you're a recovery-friendly workplace, you're being very transparent about the fact that our organization, our business has taken the training to be a recovery-friendly, and we acknowledge that behavioral health, mental health, and, all these things are important.
I'm just going to say everyone needs to do it. So, so get in touch with them. Running a nonprofit is not easy. I just can imagine it's just a lot of moving parts, and you're doing a lot. You're doing the peer coaching and the rides and the housing support and the community events and, all the things that you're doing. But, what have been some of the biggest obstacles for you as you've built 217 Recovery? You're like, why are you asking me this?
Like, where do you want me to start? Eat the microphone. Some of the biggest obstacles starting out were just learning, like, how do I start a company? I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
I'm a radio guy. And I'm like, let's figure it out. And nowadays, though, because of Google and now with AI stuff, it's probably even easier for people. Back then, I had to do the old school. It was this thick, it felt like, and I had to mail it in. It was great.
Mail?
Yeah. Now you can just get on there and do it online.
Right.
Yeah, I had to mail my stack in, and it took me 9 months to get it all together, because I'm like, no, I'm going to go through it page by page. So that was kind of a little tough. And then after getting approved, I'm like, all right, let's go get some money. And then realizing, like, most grants, you got to be around 5 years from having messes with you, And I'm like, wait, what are we supposed to do? So that was kind of frustrating. But at that time, the PIHP in the area were kind of confused, because they're like, wait, who are you? What are you trying to do? And take people to treatment.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why don't you? Yeah, but they did kind of help and kind of assist and lead us in the right direction at that time. And, so it was frustrating when we couldn't actually get reimbursed for taking people.
Sure.
And treatment center in the northern Michigan region, in the UP, they didn't, and their staffing in a lot of treatment centers, the staffing is just all over the place, and they get a new person and we give them the invoice, they put it in a stack, it's gone.
Wow.
So like $5,000 worth gone, and it was too late for them to, so we kind of got burned on that one. That was a tough one.
That's a lesson learned too, though. Like, get this out. You have 10 days or whatever.
Yeah, be more on them. But then once we had the grant, like that Marnie talked about earlier, from the feds through COVID, then we could actually take people. And then when that was pulled, April 1st, then it went back to, nope, you can't take people to treatment. And that's the thing that drives me the most nuts, is when we see a problem and we go, hey, here's how you fix it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Just do it. It's 70 cents a mile. That's cheapest you're going to get. And then we keep getting told, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. And then, okay, so you go to the state and, the state's telling us no. And the state's like, we didn't say that. And then it just becomes this whole, like, people are dying out here.
Yeah. Have you, do you have like personal donors, or have you talked to, gotten into that world yet?
No, and I wish I had time.
Yeah, right.
And again, that's a whole nother thing I'm going to have to learn, because it's not like you could probably just go knock on people's doors and say, hey, can I give me some money? But
He's talked about mailers and so on. We've reached out. There's been a few foundations that have helped us out which has been nice. But we are waiting for that group of people or one person that has deep pockets to say, here, this will help. Let me help you get people to treatment.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. But yeah, and we haven't run into that yet.
Well, not yet.
Not yet.
Let's hope, because I mean, the work you're doing, it's so boots on the ground, it's so micro, right? But it's also so macro.
Mm-hmm.
It's like runs the whole spectrum of really, really helping people one-on-one to like really changing the culture of a community and really helping to reduce stigma in a community. I mean, this is big stuff that you're doing. So, for all of the millionaires that are listening,
yes,
please think about 217 Recovery as a possibility for you to, make a donation. Now, given your backgrounds, Corey, you're in broadcasting, you're in entertainment, you're in media, you still have the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Marney, of course, in social work, getting ready to take the test. You're, going to be minus the LMSW.
Mm-hmm.
But you have this, this lived addiction. You have this lived trauma. What's one key insight or message that you're hoping that anyone watching or listening takes away today about recovery? Can we start with you, Marney?
So, I mean, I think about what I needed to hear when I was early in recovery. And well, first is it's essentially never too late, and the whole don't quit quitting, as cliche as that is because, I mean, I tried multiple times when I was in, I went to rehab multiple times. And the one thing that, and I spoke a little bit about this earlier, is that kind of like sincere desire that comes from within, and knowing that you're doing it for yourself is really, I think, a key piece.
Yeah.
Is like, this isn't going to stick if you're not doing it for you.
Right.
And not saying don't try. I mean, whatever, try and fall down and get back up, dust yourself off by all means if that's what you need to do. Because God knows that's what it took for me. But is really kind of asking those questions is like, what would it mean for you to be able to know you could wake up every day without having to use drugs or alcohol? What would that look like? And some people can't even fathom that, so because it's a whole new world.
You said when you were talking about how you used to feel, and you said you didn't know how it felt to be feeling good.
Yeah.
Like you were just chronically feeling bad.
Yeah.
How do you feel now?
I feel on top of the world.
Yeah.
I do. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I still have my downs. I still have my disappointments. Life still throws me a lot of curveballs. And before, I think I would have probably, those would have been perfect reasons to drink over it, right? I did wrong. What did I do wrong, or I didn't do good enough, or whatever the case may be. And we're all on this earth to try to be better. But I know that if, when I was drinking, I mean, there was a point where I didn't even really care if I was alive or not.
Right.
I mean, it was that, I was that in that much of a bad place. And so, to be able to feel good today and to feel productive and to love my life. I mean, I have a family, I have an amazing husband, I have a little boy. I have relationships that I've mended with my own family that were very estranged for a time. And the people that I communicate and interact with today are healthy people because I've chosen to make those my people.
Yeah.
And it's amazing and it's beautiful.
It's amazing. And, how about you, Corey? What's one takeaway that you're hoping that anyone listening or watching will take away about recovery?
I would say just understand that it's a process and it was an education for Marney and I. Marney actually paid for two. She paid for a college education and the drinking one because it's not cheap. So, and then like for parents and family that get upset, like if somebody is going to treatment or trying to go through it or trying to figure it out and, they relapse and, they come home after the relapse and they see their wife or husband or whatever and they go outside and come back in. The husband or wife's like, well, what are you doing out there? Don't get mad. Don't get mad. Don't go all defensive. What do you think I was doing out there drinking? No, stop. You earned that because there was times where you lied to that person. So no. if they come and question anything that you do, just take it and go, no, I was not drinking.
Yeah.
I could see why you'd ask me that. Like don't, because I used to get it real offensive, real defensive about it. No,
Yeah.
why would you say that?
Wow. And how's your health?
I don't know. I think I'm all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's been 10 years, though, since that big scare.
Yeah. And I'm still dealing with
Yeah.
effects. I got stomach pain and I don't know, lost 80, 90 pounds, something like that. So millionaires, if you want to learn how to lose some weight without working out, you talk to me.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
I love that. You don't need like GLP-1.
No.
You need 217.
Yep, just call me.
Exactly. I love that. Well, I want to thank both of you for being here today. And I do want to say, too, for anyone who might be struggling or know someone who is struggling. And I think, as you both pointed out, you're going to know when it's time. You're going to know when it's time to ask for help. But I have been told this before from really close friends and loved ones that even before someone knew that it was time, there was some little voice inside of them that was just like, this isn't right. Like this is not right for you. And it takes a while to listen to, but if they're ready to listen to it, how can they get in touch with you? How can they move that forward?
Yeah, they can reach out to us. Our website's 217recovery.com. But yeah, if they're feeling any kind of like, man, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, and we've dealt with this, we deal with it all the time. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't. And society kind of sets it up, especially with alcohol. It kind of sets you up to fall down, and then we blame you for falling down.
Yeah. But it's tripping you. And then you're blaming people for.
But the whole time we're telling you, don't trip.
Right.
So then it's your fault again, So we understand it, we get it, and if you don't want to be judged and you really want some help, reach out to us, 217recovery.com.
Yeah, and the holidays. We didn't really get into this, but we are recording this right before the big December holidays, and I'll tell you that has to be a difficult time. Yes. So if you're in the recovery community, you're looking for some fun in recovery, you're looking for some community, that's a good time to reach out to 217 Recovery as well, because you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah,
you guys, I'm sure, have some really fun things planned for the holidays. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your stories and your time and your vision for 217 Recovery. For everyone listening and all of you who want to donate, I'm telling you, this is an incredible opportunity to do that. If you have some extra funds that you want to give to 217, they have incredible dreams. You can find out more at their website. And if you or someone needs support, or if you want to be a part of building a more compassionate, recovery-friendly community in Northern Michigan, check out 217 Recovery, 217recovery.com. Those are the numbers, 217. Stay hopeful, stay connected, and we'll see you all next week on Currently the Conversation.